patrons, welcome back to the third part of this tutorial series. So we've got the eyes down and the nose and a bit of the skin as well. And so in this part we're mainly going to be focusing on drawing the mouth and mostly the facial hair, but I am also going to get the skin around here as well. So we'll kind of, by the end of this part, have this whole section done. So to start with, I do want to just get in the skin to the sides and then we'll work on the mouth and the facial hair. So we're going to carry on from the colours that we used for this area up here because the shadow just kind of continues down with a bit of a lighter area in the middle. So let's go in with our dark umber, our brown colour, and let's start to shade in these shadows for the skin down here. Nicely shade into the edge of where the face is. Try and be nice and neat. It's quite dark, so I'm going to burnish it a bit more. So this shadow goes up and around here. I'm going to leave a small gap because this area is a bit lighter. So as I go towards this lighter section, I'm just easing off the pressure with the brown so that it's a nice transition. Now let's add some of the burnt sienna. Just go over this area again. Add a bit of the burnt sienna into that area where we didn't add much of the brown, that lighter area. And bring this a bit further into this highlighted section as well. Going to build up the layer. I'm going to go in with the brown again to darken up some of these darkest shadows. Okay, so in the middle I'm going to blend that out with the burnt ochre and the burnt ochre 50%. So let's first go in with the burnt ochre and lightly add that all over, but mostly burnish the outer edges and this lighter section here. And then just go over with the burnt ochre 50%, the middle of the highlight. Go back in with the burnt ochre. And I'm going to go back in with the burnt sienna and just go over these shadowed darkest sections. Make them a bit more red sort of toned. So then you've got this section here, so there'll be facial hair to this side, and this section is just quite a light burnt ochre, so I'm just adding the burnt ochre to the darker parts, especially next to that shadow, and then for the lighter area add the burnt ochre 50%. Shade some of the burnt sienna to transition it a bit better and tie it all in together. There we go. Go in a bit more with the dark umber for some of these darker creases, the darkest parts within the shadows. Neaten up the edge as well, so it's a nice crisp edge. Okay, so we've done the skin there. I'll leave the skin in the middle because I'll do that when we do the mouth. So let's move on to this side. So let's carry on from this area. So we've got some skin here, which is a mixture of sort of warm orangey tones and the yellow tones. So let's layer some of the brown ochre 50% and the burnt ochre 50%. And this goes down into where the facial hair is a bit. The warmer colours is more towards where the crease is, so I'm concentrating it there. Add a bit of the burnt ochre, and also I'm going to add a little bit of brown because it's a bit more shadowed over under the nostril. Blend it a bit with that brown ochre 50%. Just going to burnish the middle with the brown ochre 50% as well. And add a bit more of that warm tone with the brown, the burnt ochre. And I'm going to use the burnt ochre 10% to add a bit of highlight and lighten it up a bit. I'm going to go over the crease with the burnt ochre 50% and just create that little shadow. It was a bit too thick, just a little bit. Okay, so as we continue down, it's just kind of like a middle value. So let's go with the burnt ochre 50%. Going to outline where this facial hair is, so we don't add the skin tone there yet. Okay. Add a bit of the burnt sienna 10% as well. And the brown ochre 10%. I'm going to use the brown ochre to add some of the shadows. I'm going to go in with the Burnt Sienna 50%. I want to work on this sort of smile line as well, the expression a bit more. So I'm going to go in with my brown pencil, the Prismacolor, and get in the shape here of the lines for the smile. And I'm going to add some of the brown over on this area because this is quite shadowed. So I'm just going to use the side to lightly shade some brown. Not applying any pressure at all. Gonna apply a bit more shadow for some of these darker areas. So like it's darker towards the bottom. Okay, so I'm also going to add a little bit of the raw umber 50% as well to act as a base for the shadow. And up here in this sort of shadow of the crease. So now I'm going to go in with the Burnt Sienna and use that to add some shadow. Firstly, I'm going to sharpen it a little bit. To shade in some shadow. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with the burnt ochre and use that to start to blend this out. I'm not burnishing with this colour, but it's going to start to naturally blend all of the colours together, even if I don't apply a lot of pressure to it. I'm going to go in the opposite direction to the direction I applied the pencil. I'm just adding this to all of the areas that have that more warm orange look to them. Now I'm going to go in a bit with the brown, just add a little bit up here. I want to go in with the brown ochre as well now to balance out those orangey tones that we've added by adding some of the yellows. Again, going in the opposite direction. I am applying a bit more pressure now. I'm going to avoid the highlights in the middle. Going to add some burnt sienna 50%. Going to add the burnt ochre as well, again. And I'm actually also going to go in with some of the burnt sienna, just to darken it up again, make it look nice and rich, especially some of these creases. And now for the middle, firstly, let's get rid of those bits of colour pencil. And for the middle, it's not too light, so I'm going to just go in with the brown ochre 50% to start with. And now I'm going to go in with the burnt ochre. Try and soften the transition of this area. I'm adding a bit of the brown ochre 50% now over here. Going to add some of the russet colour as well to give it more of a saturated look where it looks a bit redder. Add in a bit of burnt sienna. Blend it all in together. I'm adding some lighter speckles for where the stubble is over the skin. Just using the burnt sienna 10%. Also adding a bit of a highlight. Okay, so I'm going to leave this area for now. I'm just going to lighten up this area a bit. Add in the burnt ochre 10% now. Gonna add the burnt ochre. Blending this out with the burnt ochre 50%. Okay, so that's it for the skin for now. So let's move on to the actual mouth. So for the mouth, it's quite pink tone, so we're going to be using a lot of the burnt siennas. I'm going to start off by applying a layer of the brown though, actually, the Prismacolor brown for the darker shadows. So I'm first just shading in the shape of the top lip. And I'm shading in all of the shadows on that top lip. Gonna add a bit of shadow on the bottom as well. So I'm just looking for all of the areas on the mouth that are really shadowed. I'm just adding a bit of this brown. Now I'm going to fill in both the top and the bottom lip with the burnt sienna 10% to start off with. So the top and bottom lip. So now I'm going to go in with the burnt sienna 50%, the one that's slightly darker, and just use that to get in these shadows now. There's quite a lot of shadow on the top lip, so we're going to be pressing quite hard with the pencil on the top lip. I'm also going to go in with the burnt sienna as well, these darkest shadows. Just adding these shadows. It's really important to look at where the shadows and highlights are, because getting them in the right place will mean your lips are really three-dimensional and full looking. I'm going to add some more of that brown. And I'm actually even going to add some of the black. Now I'm blending over it all with the burnt ochre. Add a bit of the burnt ochre on the bottom lip as well. Doesn't need as much. I'm adding mostly the burnt sienna 50% now, all across this bottom lip. I also want to add a layer of the anthracenoid pink. Now I'm going to add and blend it all out with the burnt sienna 10%. Let's add some of the shadow again now. Starting with this brown pencil. It might look quite weird until you get the teeth and everything else in. I'm going to add some of the russet as well. Add some of the russet on the top lip as well. There's going to be quite a lot of this on the gums. And some of the burnt ochre. Add some of the burnt sienna now. Shade in these darker shadows again. Going to use the russet to indicate where the darker shadows are. Adding the burnt ochre and adding some brown as well. Now I also want to add some of the skin around the mouth. So it's quite yellow toned on the right hand side. So I'm going to use the brown ochre 50%. Again, I want to outline where the facial hair is, so I don't add too much coloured pencil over that area for now. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt ochre, 50%. A little bit of anthracenoid pink and some brown ochre. Also want to add a bit of raw umber as well. Add some burnt ochre 50% again. Bit of raw umber 10%. And I'm going to blend it out with the brown ochre 10%. Go over it with the brown ochre for the shadows. And then on the other side, it's a lot more orange and red tones. So firstly, and it's also darker. So I'm going to lay down some of the burnt ochre. Going to add a bit of the brown ochre 50% around the burnt ochre on the left hand side. I'm also going to shade some burnt sienna. For the shadows, and up to the other side as well, because the shadow is under the mouth here. Going to add some brown ochre 10% to blend out the bottom bit. I'm going to use the brown ochre to blend out the top half and to blend out the shadow as it merges with the other side. And for the middle, we're going to use the brown ochre 10% because it's quite light. I'll just use that for the middle bit. I'm going to add a bit of russet as well because it's quite saturated in this area. And because it's quite dark, we're going to add more of the burnt sienna. We're also going to go in with the Prismacolor brown and just add some of the shadow over here. So I want to get the base for the shadow and the bit of facial hair under here in. And so I'm going to start off actually with the raw umber, just the raw umber, to blend that in. Go over the top of that with the burnt sienna. Gonna add some of the colour russet below it as well. Use the burnt ochre 50% to blend these areas together a bit better. There we go. Happy with that for now. Next thing I want to do is add in some of these highlights on the lips, on the bottom lips. So the highlight is here. Okay. And so there'll be just a little bit of skin above the lips. And this is quite highlighted as well. So I'm just going to shade a bit of the brown ochre and then go in with the white and use that to add the highlight above the lips. So now I quickly want to get in the gum as well. So this is quite reddish pink tones. So what I'm going to do first is add a base layer of the burnt sienna 10%. And I'm going to sharpen this because it needs to be sharp to be able to get around the teeth nice and cleanly. So let's go around all of the teeth. So now I'm going to fill in the gums lightly. I'm not going to burnish with this colour. Just use circular motions to work the colour into all of the white grain. So now I'm going to go over it with a bit of the Anthraquinoid pink. It's quite pink on the sort of top. But mainly we're going to add some of this russet colour. So now we need to darken it up a bit. So what we're going to do is add the burnt sienna as well. I'm going to blend it out with the white now. Add some of the brown ochre as well. Some of that russet colour again. Some more of the burnt sienna. Use more of the burnt sienna on these sides rather than the middle because it's going to be more shadowed on these sides than it is in the middle. I'm looking and picking out the shadowed areas now. Gonna shade some of the brown now as well. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of black as well, just on the darkest points. Just add a bit of Anthraquinoid pink. Add a bit more of the colour russet as well in between each one. Add some more of the russet to the bottom lip as well. Gonna add some of the brown. Now I'm pressing a bit harder for these brighter highlights. Going over with the burnt sienna 50% and adding a bit of the Anthraquinoid pink. Add some of the colour russet and some of the burnt sienna. Just try and darken up this side. I'm now going to go in with the knife and use that to add some of these highlighted creases. So if you've not seen me use this before, it's a little X-Acto knife and you can use it to pull off the wax, and this therefore means you can get some details. So I like to use it for the lips, and especially I love to use it to do hair. So you can just scrape away the wax from any of the areas. So I'm just doing all of the little details, all of the little creases, any areas that I want lightened up. You can even use it to remove some of the wax and then go in with a light colour and go over it to lighten that area up. It's a good way to use the crafting knife as well. add a bit of a highlight over here. And I'm going to create the highlights here as well. Lighten that side up. So now I'm going to go in between all of these teeth, between the like two sets of teeth, because you can see some of the darker tongue and that through the gap. So the first pencil that I'm going to start off with for this is the Burnt Sienna. I'm going to give it a little sharpen so that we can get all of the details around the teeth. Okay, so I'm just going to look at the shapes of the teeth and first block it out. Even if we need to add other colours to the areas, I just want to block out where I'm filling in. Okay, so now I'm going to fill these areas in. I'm not applying too much pressure to do this. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with the black. And just use that to get in these darkest areas. So there's just a few of these gaps that just look black, especially on either side, not so much towards the middle. Now I'm going to add a bit of black down here in the middle where it's a bit more shadowed, a bit darker. Okay guys, so now let's start to work on the teeth. So the first thing that I want to do is get a base layer down using the raw umber 10%. And so this is good because it's got like a greyish sort of tone to it, but also like this yellowy green. So it works nice for teeth. And so I'm going to start off with the front two, and I'm just very lightly going to shade this on the more shadowed areas on the teeth. One common mistake that I see people make is thinking that the teeth are a lot lighter than they actually are, whereas in reality there's a lot of shadow in the teeth and they are a bit more yellow toned. They're not perfectly white, so make sure you do get some shading in there, otherwise they will just look weird. I'm gonna add the little dark bit just in the middle here. I'm adding this basically everywhere but the highlighted areas. The further back the teeth are, the more shadowed that they are because they're not in as much direct light. Okay, so now I want to go in with the grey and work on adding some more of the shadow to areas that have got a bit more of a darker grey tinge to them. I'm also going to use some of the just French grey as well. So I'm using the French grey 10% and just the French grey to do this. So I'm going to go over it with some of the light grey on the bottom set. Add some of the dark brown as well in the corner. Now I'm adding a bit of the colour Primrose to add a bit more of that cream sort of yellow tone to the teeth. And also use some of the brown Ochre 10%. And I'm going to blend over these all with the white. Blend the teeth into the gums a bit. I'm going to do the same with the bottom row, just blend over that. I want to apply a bit more pressure on the white pencil in some of these lightest areas. Now I'm going to add a bit of the brown ochre. Just some of the cracks where it's a bit more yellowy brown. Adding shadow between the teeth now and blending it up with the white pencil. So I added some of the French grey and now I'm lightening it up with the white pencil. I'm going to get the black pencil now and fill in the black areas again. I'm going to go in with the russet colour now. I'm just better defining the edge of the teeth now with the gums. I want to fix the shape of some of these teeth as well. Just look at each tooth individually as a random sort of shape. So don't worry about the fact that you're drawing teeth because they can be very tricky and challenging to draw. So I add a tiny bit of the French grey and then blend it out with the lighter grey, like I was doing before, just for the shadowed parts of each tooth. This can be quite a time-consuming process, but it can definitely change a whole portrait if it's wrong. If you don't do the teeth right, then the whole thing can look strange. Just adding that brown ochre 10% again. Gonna add some of the burnt sienna 10% down onto the teeth as well. So the colour from the gums, I'm adding a little bit onto the teeth. Add some more of the French grey to the shadows. Gonna add the raw umber 10% now for the shadows. Gonna add a bit of raw umber as well. And the French grey. I'm going to fix the shape of these now using the black pencil. Gonna raise the gums, the lips. Okay everybody, so now we're going to move on to doing the facial hair, and the first thing that I like to do is get in a basic skin tone for the actual facial hair, so that when we do the facial hair we don't have any little bits of white showing through. They're all like a skin tone, so you don't have to go in between each hair to add skin tone, very much like we did with the eyebrows. So I'm going to be using the brown ochre 50%. Let's lightly add some of that to the facial hair. You don't have to do it where the facial hair is really just thick, it's just wherever there's skin peeping through, you will want to have a base layer of a skin tone down. I'm going to add some of the burnt ochre 50% as well. This bit doesn't have to be too specific and smooth because it's going to be covered up anyway. It's just to have a basic tone down. So now I'm going to add some burnt sienna as well, because this area is more shadowed, so the skin's going to be more shadowed underneath. Add some of this down here as well, because this skin is more shadowed down here. So just add in this burnt sienna everywhere where it's nice and shadowed and dark. Okay, I'm also going to add a bit of the raw umber 50%. I'm actually going to go in with the raw umber as well, so the darker version, and just add this as a base. Okay, let's add in a bit more of the burnt sienna and a bit of the darker brown as well, and a bit of the black. Just shading in the generic tones, so where it's really dark, I'm just adding a light layer of black. So now that we've got the skin tone colours in, let's start to actually add the facial hair. So I just want to quickly burnish this out with the brown ochre. So it's quite highlighted here, so I'm just going to add a bit of white. Okay, so let's start to add in the facial hair. Let's sharpen our brown pencil. So this is something that a lot of you have been asking me, how do you do facial hair? So the first thing I do is get those skin tones in, and then I start on one area, go in with the brown pencil, and I just start to build up the little hairs. I really focus on how long the hairs are. That's really important, especially if you've got stubble and like longer facial hair. You'll want to be able to see the difference, and so change the length of your pencil strokes. Look at the direction the facial hair is going in, and it just becomes really realistic because we've already got the skin underneath. So you can just go and add the hair on top. Don't worry if it's not as dark as you need it to be at the moment. This part's just about establishing where the main hair is. We're going to be going in with the black pencil and all of that anyway. Look at how it goes over the lips, the direction it's going when it goes over the lips. You've got the stubble underneath the mouth, but most of that is going to be lighter, so we're going to have to pull it up with the knife. Just keep sharpening that pencil. So remember, keep looking at the length. For example, here it's quite stubbly and then it leads into longer facial hair sort of down there. So try not to rush through this part, because it is quite a long process. You've got to really build up the layers and the layers of hair, but it will be worth it. Just try not to rush it. If you feel like you're starting to rush, take a break from it. So I'm shading in some of the shadows for where the thicker hair is. So now that I've got it mostly all in and are happy with it with the brown pencil, just add a few of these tiny little ones up here, these little speckledy ones. Now that we've done that, I'm going to go in with a sharpened black pencil now. Just want to lift up. So we've got our black pencil. Let's use this to make some of these darker hairs now. So there's quite a lot of these really black hairs and thicker clumps of black hair, so just use this to render them. Again, keep looking at the length and the direction of the facial hair. Okay, let's add the black hairs round here as well. And add some of that shadow. There we go. Let's also add the black hairs down here. And you'll see that we've also got some whitish looking hairs. And those are the hairs we're going to create using the crafting knife. Starting to come together now. I'm going to sharpen the pencil in a minute. If it gets too blunt, make sure to keep checking it, especially when you're doing something like this where there's lots of little detailed hairs that you've got to draw. You want to make sure that you're keeping that pencil really nice and sharp. I'm going to use the brown to shade a bit of shadow onto the skin over here. Now carry on. There we go, nearly done. Okay, so now that we've got the facial hair in, we can start to add the highlight bits to the facial hair. So to do this, we've got to go back in with our knife. And so anywhere where you see it really light, little light white sort of bits, use the knife to pull these up. Just draw them in the same way you would with those black and brown bits. Just follow the direction of the facial hair, look at the length of them. There's quite a few of them down here in this darker section. So this is basically my process whenever I do facial hair. It's very similar to just how I do eyebrows. And this is a really sort of simple technique that will get you really realistic looking results, where you don't have to try and draw between each little hair to get in the skin tone, or try and save highlighted strands of hair. You can just add them over the top with a knife. Okay, so nearly done with this. I don't want to add too many. You can go overboard with this. So yeah, anyway guys, that is basically how I go about creating the facial hair, doing the mouth and the teeth and that sort of stuff. So we're coming up to finishing this part off now. So in the next part, we'll be working on getting the rest of the skin for the head in. I'm going to use this knife as well to create little highlights and textures around the skin, like little creases, little shiny bits. So I'm just going to wipe all of the bits off the paper with the brush. So anyway guys, that is it for this part. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye everybody.